So I moved. At the time of painting this, I've been here for about 2 weeks, and I just couldn't wait any longer to paint something. And honestly, I've been feeling extremely homesick, so I've been calling this piece Thinking of Home. Originally, I sketched it out on my iPad, then I put it into Photoshop, edited it a little bit, and then printed it off onto some nicer paper. Then I got to work with my favorite medium ever, gouache. I do want to apologize for the angle and the lighting. I don't really have a space set up yet to record, so I just have her taped down on my desk right next to my computer, and I have the tripod just off to the side in the only spot that was available. Now, about the move. This wasn't a move that we were really looking forward to. It wasn't a move we were planning on. It wasn't anything that we had on our radar at all. Basically, we had the house through my dad's job, and in March of this year, the company that he had worked for 34 years, the company was bought by a major corporation about 3 years ago, and they did what pretty much every corporation does when it buys a business, where they kept a big chunk of the staff but immediately fired about a third of the employees, and then once they kind of learned how the place works, they slowly started firing more of the old employees to bring in their new employees. And once the resort decided that they were going to be going in a new direction, which didn't include him, that meant that we no longer had our housing. And it was very rough. And for a variety of reasons I don't really feel like getting into, because he no longer had his job, we no longer had the house, it meant that both me and my mom had to also quit our jobs, because we technically worked at the resort, but we worked for the hotels, which were owned by a different company, but it was still, our housing was gone. There was no available housing in the area that would fit our needs, so we had to move. Now, we had lived in this house for I think about 25 years. It was a lot to pack and organize and sort and wash and decide if we wanted to keep it, if we wanted to donate something, if we wanted to just throw it on the burn pile. There were cupboards we had to deep dive into. There were cupboards where we didn't even remember what was in them because they hadn't been touched for so long. And this was only a 3-bedroom house, so it was not very big. Because we were all going to be moving into such small places, we had to be pretty ruthless with what we were going to keep and what we were going to get rid of. So we decided collectively to start with areas that would be easier to go through and then work our way up to the more sentimental and difficult areas. So for me, that meant going through the closet first. I knew what clothes I wore every day, and I knew what clothes I hadn't worn for 5 years. The last 20% of the move, it took somehow more time than the first 80%. There are a lot of memories in that house. We've known for a while that when we move, the house is going to get torn down. It was in kind of middling shape when we moved in. It was employee housing, so it wasn't very well kept up, and things would start to go wrong with the house, and we'd bring it up, and they would just say, "Don't worry about it, it's getting torn down next year." And we lived with that over our heads for over a decade. The floors would start to get weak, and they would just say, "Oh, it's fine, don't get comfy, you're leaving in a year anyways." Or when the roof started to leak, "It's okay, we're gonna tear it down this summer anyways." And they kept saying this, and it never happened. So after it would get to a point where it was almost unlivable, we would take it upon ourselves to fix the issues. That had been their plan for close to 15 years at this point. And so once we left, they went in, reaffirmed that yes, we want to tear it down, because they could, instead of having one house with a family or a couple of employees, they could level the area and put in about 20 tiny trailers. I remember the day we moved in and I got my own room, and my brother let me pick which of the 2 bedrooms I wanted, and I remember picking the one I picked because I liked the light in that room better, and I I was so small at the time that I didn't know why that was why I liked that room, and he was actually quite happy to pick the other room because he wanted it to be a little shadier because he doesn't like the bright sunlight as much. Where the calendar was kept by my parents' room, we would measure our heights growing up. There was a fireplace and we would sit in front of it. In the cold winter, we would have that thing on more often than not because it was just so much cozier and warmer than the electric heater. We had birthday parties. We celebrated people's lives in that house. We mourned their losses in that house. We witnessed natural disasters time and time again. We almost got flooded away one year. We almost got taken out by an avalanche the next year. We almost lost everything to a massive forest fire. During the pandemic, the quiet of the mountains was my main source of solace. It was when things got too crazy or too loud in town, just knowing that an hour away was my quiet mountain home. It was also the only house any of our animals had ever known. The move was pretty easy on our dog, and it was a lot harder on the cats. They went from living in a quiet, isolated area where our neighbors, there were quite a few of them, but they were on different lots. They were across the streets. They were down the hill. And so suddenly having neighbors on every wall and above us has been very stressful for my sweet little cat Alice. And I got super lucky. One of my oldest and dearest friends, they were renting an apartment on the coast, and they'd been here for a couple of years, and they had rented a 2-bedroom. They were using one room as literally a room with their bed for sleeping, and the other room was their office. They insisted I move in with them. I had turned them down originally because I didn't want to impose, but they kept prodding and insisting, and so eventually I did decide to move in, and it was hard. And I'm very grateful that they put up with me because for the first couple of weeks, I just laid in bed. There were some fun things that happened during the move. About a week before our move out date, my mom went out to the porch to throw some garbage away and found a couple of abandoned baby stoats. They were so small and so wobbly. We've only found 2 of them, so we're not sure what happened to the nest, but knowing how territorial stoats are, we gave them some water and then left them, left a sock for them to hide under, and they were there the next morning. And so we took them down to a rehab clinic in town, and the lady was so excited that they were baby stoats. I am pretty lucky though, because my parents actually ended up moving to the town across the bay, so they're about an hour drive, but they're very close, so I do get to see my family often, and my aunt and uncle just live down the road about 15 minutes, so there is family in the area, and that's been very comforting. When it came time to finally leave, it was hard. I had lived on that mountain for almost my entire life. I went away for a couple of years for college, but then after college I moved back in because I had to get a job to pay for my college. The back porch was where Mom found our old cat Noodles when she was only 2 weeks old. She'd been abandoned by her mom because she was a runt. Out back was the old swing, and I'd spent so many hours outside on that thing reading books and just seeing how high I could go. The back room that had been my brother's room, after he moved out, when my uncle died and my brother moved out, my cousin moved in, and that room then became his room. And then years later when my cousin moved out, we used it as a storage room because we weren't really sure. After Gran had passed, we'd ended up with a lot of extra stuff that we didn't have room for, so we just kind of put everything in that room. I turned one of the walls into my little art studio, and in 2019 I started recording video. I miss having that little space. The night when I left the house for the last time, I loaded up my car as much as I could, and I had to leave a few wayward boxes that my parents would bring down in the truck with their final load. I said goodbye to the mountains, I grabbed the cats, and just like that, we were off. I thought it would be easier to move them in the evening, just so there would be less traffic, but everything just took so much longer than we planned on, so when we left really late at night, it was a very lonely drive. My friends are amazing, and a lot of them are night owls, and so they were in a Discord call with me for the whole 4-hour drive.
Baby, you're okay. You're okay. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh, Mister. Ellie, Alice, my children.
I'm very lucky because my microphone that's attached to my headphones isn't very good, and so they didn't hear at all when I was crying. However, they did hear the cats, because the cats don't like being in the car. They meowed almost the whole way for about 3 hours. They made it clear that they were unhappy, and then after we got to the apartment at 1 in the morning, they didn't make much noise for the next couple of days. The first night in the apartment was kind of rough. I'd been bringing things over for a while. Over the last month, I'd been bringing boxes and eventually my bed, my art supplies. And when I got there, I brought in my precious cargo of cats. I set up the litter box, and then I passed out on my bed, just hugging the fur babies. We've slowly gotten used to this space. However, just having noisy neighbors, and they're not even that noisy, just people walking by so often by the front windows, it still causes Alice a bit of stress, but we're slowly working her through that. This year has not been easy by any means for any of us, but I'm so grateful to have wonderful friends. I'm grateful to have a place to sleep at night. I'm so grateful that people have bought from my Etsy this year. It's meant so much to me. I'm still out of a job, and so that's been my one source of income, and I'm so grateful. Words cannot even begin to express how grateful I am for having such wonderful people in my life. And as we're about to end the year, I hope that going into the new year, it's better for all of us. I hope it's a year full of luck and love and light. Now, to talk about the artwork just a little bit, since I've got a little bit of time left. This is one of the rare occasions where I started with a concept and then worked forward, and so my concept was just, I was thinking of home and I was missing home, and overall I'm so happy with how she came out. I think it's super cute. It's a little more, I guess, quote-unquote surrealist than I normally go, but I really liked working with this concept, and the colors, I wanted it to be a little bit dark, but I also wanted it to be warm, so that's why I went with a warm gray tone for the background, and I wanted her to be kind of like illuminating the home area, which is why I gave her hair that's red, kind of like a candle flame. This was the first time I've ever drawn an image in Procreate and then printed it out onto a thicker watercolor-like paper, and I think the result was really nice, and I would like to do this more, because usually what I would have done is I would have drawn it, printed it on printer paper, done an image transfer where you draw on the back of the paper with graphite or charcoal, and it's just a lot more time intensive and it's a lot messier, but just being able to lighten up your image and then print it onto the nice paper just from the get-go is such a nice discovery, and I look forward to doing it more in the future. And like I said at the beginning, this was done with gouache, which is my favorite medium. I know it's not a medium for everybody. I like it because it has the opacity of an acrylic but the fluidity of a watercolor, and together that's just the best combo in my opinion. I did try at one point to use a Posca pen. That failed for the main white areas of the houses, however the black pen is very nice and smooth for the windows. Now, around this point, I decided that I wanted to have something as a background element, but I didn't want to draw a full background because I didn't want to subtract from the focal point, which was the girl. And so I decided to add in a couple of stars, a couple of clouds, a moon, and I think it added just enough interest in the background without subtracting from the main focal point. Now, because I'd used so many warm colors and so many reds, I wanted to use a contrasting color for a few detail areas, and so I settled on this very pretty turquoise blue, and I just went in and added a couple of details, and I think it really made it pop a lot more than it would have if I had used another orange or another white or a different warm color. I just added in a few little details, I shaded them in, and that was pretty much the final touches of the piece. Overall, I'm so happy with how she turned out. I'm so happy with the painting process. I think it was a lot of fun. It was the first time I was able to paint in the new place. Like I said at the beginning, I don't have an area set up to paint with at the moment, so this was just done at my computer. I had the tripod off to the side where it was the only place it would fit. Going forward, I do want to have a dedicated area where I can record speed paintings. I just haven't quite gotten to that point yet, but it's coming soon, I hope. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening to me ramble about my weird, stressful moving situation, and I hope to see everybody next time. I hope you have a good day. Enjoy the delightful peel and the close-ups.